The morning started quietly in Helen's small home on the edge of Portland. The kind of quiet that feels too still, like the world is holding its breath. She stood by the kitchen window, watching thin layers of fog drift through the garden she used to tend so carefully. The flowers had wilted a little since last spring, but she didn't have the same energy anymore. She was 60, living alone, retired from her teaching job. And though she told everyone she enjoyed the peace, deep down she knew it wasn't peace, it was emptiness. Her son Daniel had grown up here. Every corner of the house reminded her of him, the small pencil marks on the wall tracking his height, the faint scratch on the table from when he carved his initials, the photo of him in a baseball uniform grinning like the world was his. Those memories kept her company now, even though they often came with a sting of loneliness. That morning, however, felt different. Daniel had called the night before. He said, "Mom, I'll come by tomorrow. There's something I've been meaning to tell you." His voice sounded calm, maybe too calm. She hadn't seen him in months, only spoke on video calls where everything felt distant and polite. The thought of him visiting filled her with both excitement and unease. Something in his tone had lingered in her mind all night. She got up early, made coffee, and prepared breakfast the way she used to when he was a teenager. Blueberry pancakes, scrambled eggs, and a little bowl of strawberries. The smell filled the house and brought back a flood of memories. Daniel running down the stairs late for school, laughing with a mouthful of pancakes, asking for just one more. Those were the moments Helen lived for. The small, simple ones. When the clock struck 9, she heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Her heart jumped. She quickly wiped her hands on a towel and looked in the mirror by the hallway. Her silver hair was neatly tied back, and she wore the soft blue cardigan Daniel had gifted her last Christmas. "You look fine," she told herself, though her reflection looked more nervous than confident. The doorbell rang once, that familiar, gentle tone, and when she opened the door, there he was. Daniel stood taller than she remembered, dressed in a gray jacket and jeans, holding a small paper bag in one hand. He looked like a man who carried the weight of the world but hid it behind a polite smile. "Hey, Mom," he said warmly. Helen smiled, though her throat tightened. "Daniel," she breathed, reaching to hug him. He smelled faintly of coffee and autumn air, familiar and comforting. "You look good," she said. "So do you," he replied, though she noticed the pause before he said it. They walked into the kitchen together, and Helen's heart filled when she saw him sit down at the old wooden table, the same seat he always took growing up. She poured him coffee, and for a few minutes, everything felt normal. The sound of spoons clinking, the smell of breakfast, the rhythm of small talk. "So, how's work?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "It's fine," he said. "Busy as always. And how's that girl you were seeing? Claire, right?" He smiled faintly, looking down. "We're not together anymore. It didn't work out." Helen's heart softened. She wanted to ask what happened, but she didn't. Daniel had always been private. Instead, she said gently, "You'll find someone who fits you better. You always do." He nodded, but didn't respond. There was something in his silence. Not sadness exactly, but something heavier. Helen felt it settle in the room like invisible fog. She took a sip of tea, waiting for him to say more, but he didn't. After a while, he leaned back in his chair and looked around the room. "It feels smaller," he said. She chuckled lightly. "That's what happens when you grow up. Everything looks different. Maybe," he said softly, eyes distant. "Or maybe I just notice things now that I didn't before." Helen tilted her head. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then met her eyes. "I mean, how much you did for me, Mom. I don't think I ever really understood that before." Her chest warmed at his words. "You don't have to say that, honey. That's what mothers do." Kay nodded, but his gaze stayed fixed on her face, like he was trying to memorize it. There was something unsettling in that look, tender but burdened. It made her heart race for reasons she didn't understand. She broke the silence with a small laugh. "You said on the phone there was something you wanted to tell me. Should I be worried?" Daniel exhaled slowly. "No, not worried," he said. "Just, it's something I've been thinking about for a while. I didn't know how to bring it up. The tone of his voice made her heartbeat quicken. She leaned forward. You can tell me anything, Daniel. You know that. He looked at her again, and this time his eyes seemed to reach right into her soul deep. Searching, filled with emotion she couldn't name. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The air between them felt heavy, charged with something powerful and unspoken. Then, before he could say anything, the wind blew through the half-open window, knocking over a small photo frame on the counter. It was an old picture of the two of them, Daniel as a little boy with missing teeth, hugging her tightly. Helen picked it up, smiling faintly. You always held on to me like I was your whole world back then, she said softly. Daniel looked at the picture too. You were, he replied quietly. Helen froze. There was something in the way he said it. Not casual, not nostalgic, but raw. The kind of truth that comes from deep inside. She looked back at him, her throat tight. Daniel. He smiled slightly, shaking his head as if to lighten the moment. Sorry, I didn't mean to get so serious. It's okay, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. For a while they sat in silence again. Both lost in thoughts, neither dared to speak aloud. Then Daniel stood. Let's go outside, he said. It feels too heavy in here. Helen followed him out to the porch, clutching her mug. The air was cool, the kind that hinted at the first days of fall. The porch swing creaked as they sat down side by side. The garden stretched before them, quiet and still. He looked out toward the trees and said, You know, I used to sit here with you after school. You'd ask me about my day, and I'd always make up stories because I didn't want you to worry about the truth. Helen smiled faintly. You always were a storyteller. KB, he said. But back then, I didn't want you to see how much I missed Dad. I didn't want you to think you'd failed me. Our chest tightened. Oh, Daniel, I never thought you blamed me. Didn't, he said quickly. Not once. But I blamed myself for him leaving, for you being alone, for everything that went wrong. Tears pricked her eyes, but she blinked them away. None of that was your fault. You were just a boy. He turned to her, his face soft but full of emotion. Still, I saw how strong you were. You've never complained, never gave up. You were always there, holding everything together, I guess. I've never told you how much that meant to me. Helen swallowed hard, her throat aching. You don't have to. I know. No, he said, shaking his head. You don't. Because I didn't come here just to visit Mom. I came because there's something I need to say before I lose the chance. Her breath caught. Lose the chance. What do you mean? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at her again, eyes steady, deep, full of a tenderness that made her heart tremble. Mom, he said quietly, you've always been my reason to do better, to keep going. And I've realized I can't keep living my life without saying what I really feel. Helen froze. The air around them seemed to still. The wind stopped, the leaves quieted, even the sound of birds faded. She didn't know what he was about to say, but something inside her whispered that this moment, this quiet, suspended second would change everything. Her fingers tightened around the edge of her mug, and she said softly, Daniel, what are you trying to tell me? He took a deep breath, his eyes locked on hers. That you mean more to me than you'll ever know, he said slowly, and before she could ask what he meant, before she could even think. His eyes glistened, and she realized that whatever came next would alter both their hearts forever. The air between Helen and Daniel hung heavy after those words. She could feel her heart pounding, her thoughts spinning too fast to hold. You mean more to me than you'll ever know. Those words echoed in her mind like a melody that wouldn't fade. She stared at him for a long moment, searching his face for clues, but all she saw was sincerity and something deeper. Something she couldn't quite name. Daniel looked like a man carrying emotions too big for words, too fragile to be spoken aloud. Helen swallowed hard. Daniel, she said softly, what do you mean by that? He looked away for a second, his eyes fixed on the trees swaying in the distance. It's hard to explain, he began. I've spent so much of my life trying to be what people expect, the good son, the responsible man. But somewhere along the way, I started to forget who I was inside. Paused, voice low. And I realized that the only place I've ever truly felt at peace is here. With you." Helen's breath caught in her chest. "Daniel, he interrupted gently. "You don't have to say anything. I just need you to understand. My life feels different now. My priorities, my feelings. Everything has shifted." She could feel the warmth of the sun fading as clouds rolled across the sky. It was as though nature itself was holding its breath. "You sound like something's wrong," she said. "Are you in trouble?" Daniel let out a small, humorless laugh. "Not trouble, exactly. Just clarity, clarity." He turned toward her, his expression open, vulnerable. "After Claire left, I started thinking about what really matters. Who really matters? I've been living in a world full of noise. People telling me to move faster, earn more, settle down, do what's expected. But when I thought about happiness, real happiness, it always came back to one person. Care." Helen's hands trembled slightly. "Daniel?" He looked at her with eyes that carried both pain and love. "You," he said quietly. "It always came back to you." The words sank deep into her heart, heavy and confusing. She didn't know what to say. She loved her son more than anything, but this sounded different. Not wrong, but deeper, emotional in a way that defied simple labels. "Daniel." "I think you're tired," she said, finally, trying to keep her voice steady. "You've been through a breakup and you're probably feeling lost. Sometimes when life falls apart, we cling to what feels safe. That's normal." He shook his head. "It's not about safety, Mom. It's about truth. I've spent years chasing things that never filled me. And every time I felt lost, I thought about coming home to you, to this house, to the way you always made me feel seen." Helen's eyes filled with tears. "You've always been seen, Daniel. You're my son. I've never stopped seeing you." He smiled faintly. "I know. That's what makes it so hard to say what I'm feeling." She tried to hold his gaze, but her heart was racing. She couldn't let her mind drift to places it shouldn't, "Daniel." She whispered, "Maybe you should tell me what's really going on." "The truth." "The truth," he said quietly, "is that I've been running from my emotions for a long time. I thought success or relationships would fill that emptiness inside me. But now I realize the love I've been searching for, the kind that's patient, pure, unconditional, it was here all along. With you." Helen felt her chest tighten. She wanted to speak, but words failed her. She could see that Daniel wasn't speaking out of confusion or weakness. His face showed peace, like he had finally accepted something that had been haunting him for years. The sound of wind rustling through the trees filled the silence between them. Helen stood up, wrapping her arms around herself. "Daniel, please, don't say things you'll regret later. You're my son." "I can't." He stood too, his tone calm but firm. "I'm not saying this to hurt you. I'm saying it because you deserve to know how deeply you're loved. You've always given, and no one's ever given back to you in the same way. I see that now. And I want you to know I'll always be here for you. You're not alone." Tears slid down Helen's face before she could stop them. The words she wanted to say tangled inside her. She didn't know if she was crying out of love, confusion, or heartbreak. Daniel reached out, hesitated, then gently touched her hand. His palm was warm, familiar. "It's okay," he said softly. "You don't have to say anything." Helen looked up at him, her lips trembling. "You've always had a good heart," she whispered. "And I know you mean well. But some things can't be spoken, Daniel. Some feelings belong in the quiet." He nodded slowly, understanding the boundary she was trying to set, but the look in his eyes didn't fade. "Maybe," he said, "but silence doesn't change the truth." They stood there quietly, the porch creaking beneath their feet, the cool wind brushing past. Helen could feel the world shifting around her. Something unspoken had been revealed, something that could never be undone. Daniel finally stepped back, giving her space. "I'm sorry if I made things harder," he said gently. "That wasn't my intention, Ka." "No," she said quickly, shaking her head. "You didn't hurt me. You just surprised me." He gave a small, sad smile. "I guess I've been doing that since I was born." She laughed softly, wiping her eyes. Yes, you've always had a way of turning my world upside down. For the first time in a long while, they both smiled. The tension didn't vanish, but it softened, like sunlight breaking through clouds. Let's go back inside, she said finally. I'll make more tea. They sat at the kitchen table again, quiet but calmer now. Daniel talked about his plans, maybe taking some time off work, maybe traveling for a bit. Helen listened, grateful to hear him dream again, as he spoke. She found herself studying him, the way his eyes lit up when he talked, the way he still had that boyish spark hidden beneath the weight of adulthood. He was her son, her greatest joy, her only constant in a world that kept changing. When he paused, she said softly, "You're right about one thing, Daniel. We do forget what really matters. Maybe we both have." He looked at her curiously. "What do you mean?" She smiled faintly. "I've spent so long trying to be strong, the dependable one, the one who doesn't need help. But maybe I do. Maybe I've needed you more than I let myself admit." Daniel's expression softened, and for a moment the heaviness between them melted into something tender, mutual understanding. A shared loneliness finally recognized. "I'm here," he said quietly. "I know," she replied, "and that's enough." They stayed like that for a long time, sitting in the fading light, neither speaking much. Just existing together, two souls who had carried too much silence for too long. When the clock ticked past 6, Daniel finally stood. "I should head back soon," he said. "It's a long drive." Helen nodded, though her chest ached at the thought of him leaving. "You can stay the night if you want." He smiled gently. "Maybe next time." She followed him to the door. The evening air had cooled, and a soft glow filled the horizon. He turned to her one last time, his expression thoughtful. "Mom," he said quietly, "promise me something." "What?" "Don't hide how you feel anymore. About anything. Life's too short for that." She nodded slowly. "I'll try." He smiled, and for a moment everything felt still again, like time had paused between them. Then he stepped forward, wrapped his arms around her, and held her tight. Helen closed her eyes, letting the moment sink in. The embrace said everything their words couldn't. Love, forgiveness, and an unspoken promise to never drift too far apart again. When he finally let go and walked toward his car, she stood in the doorway watching him. The sound of the engine faded down the road, leaving behind the quiet hum of crickets and the whisper of wind through the trees. Inside, the house felt emptier than before, but not cold. His words still lingered in the air. "Don't hide how you feel." Helen sat by the window long after he left, her heart full and heavy all at once. She didn't fully understand what had changed between them that day, but she knew something had, and that nothing would ever be quite the same again. The following morning, Helen woke up earlier than usual. The house was quiet, but the silence didn't feel peaceful. It felt too heavy, like something important had been left unfinished. She sat on the edge of her bed, looking out the window where soft sunlight slipped through the curtains. The air carried the faint scent of last night's rain. And for a moment, she thought about Daniel's face as he said goodbye. There had been a calmness in his eyes, but also something else, something she couldn't quite name. Helen went downstairs and poured herself a cup of coffee. The kitchen felt emptier without his voice filling the room. His words kept echoing in her mind. "Don't hide how you feel anymore." She had always been the one who stayed strong, who kept her heart guarded behind polite smiles and quiet routines. But now something inside her felt unlocked. She picked up her phone and hesitated before typing a message. "Hope you reached safely." She stared at the screen for a moment, then hit send. Within seconds, the typing bubble appeared. "Just got home," Daniel replied. "Thanks for everything, Mom. Yesterday meant a lot to me." She smiled softly, a warmth spreading through her chest. But beneath that warmth, there was an something she didn't want to admit even to herself. The day went on quietly. Helen tried reading, watering her plants, doing laundry, anything to distract her thoughts, but everything reminded her of him. The way he smiled, the way his eyes softened when he spoke. She'd seen him as her little boy for so long, but yesterday she had seen the man he had become, compassionate, lost, searching for something real. That evening, she sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. The phone buzzed again. It was Daniel. "Can I call you?" "Course," she typed back. When his voice came through the line, it was calm but full of emotion. "Hey, Mom," he said softly. "I've been thinking a lot since I left." "So have I," she admitted. "It was a heavy day." "I didn't mean to overwhelm you," he said. "I just needed to be honest." "I know," she replied, "and I appreciate that." There was silence for a moment, the kind of pause that carried 1,000 unspoken things. Then he said, "I'm planning to take a few weeks off work. I was thinking of driving out to the coast, maybe visit some old places, clear my head. I'd like you to come with me." Helen blinked in surprise. "Me?" "Yeah," he said. "You deserve a break too. You've spent your whole life taking care of everyone else. It's time someone took care of you for once." Her throat tightened. "Daniel, that's sweet, but no excuses," he interrupted gently. "We'll keep it simple, a road trip, just us. Used to do that when I was a kid, remember?" She smiled faintly, remembering the summer drives they used to take when he was small, their old blue car. The music, the laughter. "Those were good times," she said softly. "Then let's do it again," he said. A fresh start. No expectations, just memories. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded to herself. "All right, let's do it." A week later, Helen packed her small suitcase and waited outside as Daniel pulled up in his car. He smiled as he stepped out, and the moment she saw him, all her doubts faded. He looked lighter, calmer, like he had found a piece of himself again. The drive began quietly, both of them lost in thought as the countryside rolled past. Music played softly from the radio, old songs that made Helen's heart swell with nostalgia. Every few miles, Daniel would glance at her with a small smile, and she would smile back, silently grateful for the peace between them. As they drove along the coast, they stopped at a small diner for lunch. It was the kind of place that smelled of coffee and sea salt, with faded photographs on the walls. Over lunch, Daniel talked about his childhood, how he missed the days when things felt simple. "When it was just the two of them against the world, you always made things feel safe," he said, stirring his coffee. "Even when we didn't have much, I never felt like I was missing anything." Helen's eyes softened. "I did what any mother would do." "No," he said gently. "You did more than that. You gave me everything." She didn't know how to respond, so she just reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "You turned out all right, didn't you?" He laughed, a sound that melted the heaviness between them. "I'm still figuring it out." They spent the next few days driving along the ocean, visiting quiet beaches, small motels, and places that time seemed to have forgotten. Every evening, they would watch the sun sink into the horizon, talking about life, mistakes, dreams, and things they'd never said before. One night, as they sat on a small bench overlooking the sea, Daniel spoke again. "You know, I think that's why I came home. To remember what real love feels like." Helen turned to him. "Real love?" He nodded slowly. "The kind that doesn't expect anything. The kind that forgives. That stays." Her chest ached with emotion. "You'll find that one day, Daniel. You're still young." He looked at her with a quiet intensity. "Maybe I already did." The words hung between them, heavy but tender. Helen didn't respond this time. She just looked at the waves and let the silence speak for them. Later that night, they stayed at a small inn near the shore. Helen couldn't sleep. She kept replaying his words, trying to make sense of what he really meant. Was it love, gratitude, or something deeper that neither of them could name? The next morning, as they packed up to leave, Daniel noticed her silence. "You're quiet," he said softly. She smiled faintly. "Just thinking." "About what?" "About how fast everything changes. One day you're holding a baby in your arms, and the next, he's driving you across the country." He smiled warmly. "You make it sound like I've grown up." "You have," she said, her voice soft. More than you realize. They drove back home that afternoon. The road felt shorter, quieter. When they reached the house, the sun was setting behind the trees again. It's just like the evening he first told her how he felt. Daniel helped her carry her bag inside. "Thank you for coming with me," he said. "It meant more than you know." Helen looked at him, her eyes full of both love and sadness. "It meant a lot to me, too." He hesitated at the doorway, as if unsure whether to leave. "Mom," he said finally, "I want you to promise me something." "What's that?" "Promise me you'll live for yourself, too. Do the things that make you happy. You've given enough to everyone else." She smiled gently. "I'll try." He nodded. "That's all I wanted to hear." He pulled her into a hug, and this time it felt different, longer, deeper, filled with gratitude rather than confusion. She closed her eyes and held on, feeling the weight of the moment settle in her heart. When he finally left, Helen stood by the window, watching his car disappear down the street. The emptiness returned, but it wasn't painful this time. It felt peaceful, like something had been healed. That night, as she sat in her living room, surrounded by the quiet hum of the house, she realized what Daniel had truly given her. It wasn't confusion or heartbreak. It was a reminder. A reminder that love, in all its forms, is powerful when it's honest and kind. His words, "Don't hide how you feel," had changed her more than she expected. For the first time in years, Helen felt ready to live again, not as a mother defined by responsibility, but as a woman with her own story to write. She picked up her journal and began to write, not about loss or fear, but about love, gratitude, and second chances. Outside, the wind moved softly through the trees, and for a brief moment, she swore she could still hear his voice saying goodbye. She smiled to herself and whispered, "I'm not hiding anymore." The next morning, sunlight filled the room. Helen brewed her coffee and looked out the window at the road where Daniel had driven away. Life felt different, now lighter, freer, as if she had finally exhaled after holding her breath for too long. And somewhere deep inside, she knew that this was only the beginning of her healing, her rediscovery, and her quiet, unspoken love that would always remain, not in words, but in the spaces between them.